Believed to have lived in a cave with about 50 immediate family members, all born of incest, the Beans were known for robbing, kidnapping, and eventually murdering strangers whom they later dismembered and ate. Over the course of 25 bloody years, the Beans are said to have cannibalized 1,000 people. This disturbing tale is also believed to be the true story behind The Hills Have Eyes, the terrifying cult horror classic. But is the legend of Sonny Bean even real? So I don't know about you guys, but growing up, I used to watch tons of different horror movies, tons of different series that you can think of, all the Saws, the Final Destinations, Hills Have Eyes, obviously, Silent Hill, tons of different ones. Make sure you guys comment your favorite horror movie below. I'll let you know if I've seen it or if I've ever even heard about it. But other than that, once I heard about the actual true backstory or whatever the actual Hills Have Eyes are based on, I figured I have to do a video on this, especially for Halloween coming up. I figured why not. So make sure you guys, like I said, comment your favorite horror movie or whatever, like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. But we getting right into it. The man known as Alexander Sonny Bean was supposedly born in the late 1600s near Edinburgh, Scotland. Though very little is actually known about his early life, according to Scottish historian Dr. Louis Yeoman, Bean's story might have actually begun at the turn of the 17th century, though he does not appear in the historical records until nearly a century later in 1755. Yeoman adds that Bean is also placed in the 15th century during the reign of James I of Scotland, though that King James may have been conflated with King James VI, who ruled Scotland at the turn of the 17th century. But no matter what time period in which Sonny Bean may reside, he is always viewed as a merciless barbarian. Bean might also have originally been a tanner by trade. Others say that he was first a hedger and a ditcher, but nevertheless, most accounts agree that Bean eventually left these trades behind and took up with a woman sometimes called Black Agnes Douglas in Ayrshire. The legend goes that the Beans retreated from society and confined themselves in a cave over the sea, now called Benincav. The hideaway was said to have become hidden when the tides rose high enough. The giant rock formation was allegedly equipped with various tunnels that spanned over a mile in depth and allowed ample space for the young couple to start and raise a hideous family. Their words, not mine. The Bean clan grew quickly, with Sonny Bean's wife eventually giving birth to 14 kids. With ever-increasing mouths to feed and no real trade to fall back on, Bean turned to robbery and murder to make ends meet, and it didn't take long for his family to help him with his crimes. So it was a whole family affair at the end of the day. The Beans worked together to ambush lone travelers and local passerbys and were consequently left with a mountain of bodies to dispose of. As the legend goes, this is how the Beans ultimately turned to cannibalism. The criminal clan was said to hack up the bodies of their victims, quarter them, and pickle them in their cave. As time went on, the family continued to grow. The cave eventually became home to 18 grandsons and 14 granddaughters, all born out of incest. The Bean clan eventually numbered 45, and all of them had a hankering for human flesh. Now with what was essentially a small army to help him, Sonny Bean went on to orchestrate ambushes with military precision, tracking and pouncing upon their victims before dragging their lifeless bodies back to the cave to be consumed. A list of missing persons grew by the day, and occasionally limbs would wash ashore, but the Beans, hidden from society, went undetected. Instead, local innkeepers became suspects as they were usually the last people to have seen the missing person in question. Many innkeepers grew fearful of being wrongfully accused, and several of them abandoned their inns for other occupations entirely. Basically, he just had these men just quitting their jobs completely, saying, yo, I'm not even going to deal with that. But the Beans' reign of terror was not to last forever. One day, the Beans encircled a husband and wife on horseback as they returned from a local fair. The Beans ambushed the couple from behind and took the woman down immediately, gutting her and gnashing on her entrails. Her husband, who witnessed the horror, fought the Beans hard. He barreled over several of them with his horse and pulled out both a sword and a pistol until he was released from their grip. By this time, a group of about 30 fairgoers had made their way along the same exact path, and when the Beans took notice of them, they retreated, though not before exposing themselves as the cannibalistic cave-dwelling murderers that they actually were. Meanwhile, the husband of the woman made his way to Glasgow, where he implored King James VI to do something about the Beans. The king is said to have personally led a mob of about 400 men. The king's bloodhounds led a charge to Benyay Cave, where they were met with an unfathomable scene of carnage, severed limbs, hanging bodies, and piles of stolen loot. The Beans were arrested and taken to Leith, Scotland, where they awaited execution. The locals were said to have been so disgusted with the Bean family that they demanded a more painful punishment than mere death. As a result, 21 of the Bean women were burned to death, and the men were dismembered and left to bleed out. Now, the real problem is that many historians contend that the horrific story of Sonny Bean is likely just that, a story. Besides the story of a bean from 1755, there are no contemporary records to verify his existence. There are also no records of the missing persons, the various innkeepers forced to abandon their trades, or even the 400-person manhunt led by the King of Scotland himself. Indeed, Yeoman asserted that if the king had led a charge to dispose of a family of cannibalistic Scots hiding in a cave, there would certainly have been a record of it. Now, the real question is, where did this legend originate? Some historians, including Yeoman, contend that it was simply an English propaganda tool. Yeoman says that it sounds like the plot for a box office topping horror film, and that's because it was invented to serve a very similar purpose, to sell books. It also has a more sinister subtext. The books it sold were published not in Scotland, but in England, at the time when there was a widespread prejudice against the Scots. Yeoman says that the English media often portrayed the Scottish as sinister barbarians during the late 17th and early 18th centuries because the Scots were trying to reinstate one of their own on the British throne. And in an effort to disenfranchise their cause, such stories were passed along, and the name Sawney was actually a term used to describe a cartoonish Scottish character. Yeoman says it's like calling a cartoon Irishman Paddy. The Sawney story was a dig at Scots, a people so barbarous they could produce a monster like Sawney, who lived in a cave and ate people. Pretty crazy even to believe that at that point, but who knows? Back then, people were probably believing whatever they heard. The gruesome story of Sawney Bean, whether true or not, would nonetheless go on to inspire the media for years to come. As it turns out, Sawney Bean is even behind the true story of The Hills Have Eyes, one of my favorite horror movies of all time at the end of the day. Now, in case you haven't seen it, the film centers around a family who has become stranded in the Nevada desert and are subsequently hunted and terrorized by a group of inbred mutants who live in the nearby mountains. In the movie, just as in the story of Sawney Bean, this terrifying family of cannibals preys on unsuspecting travelers, murdering, eating, and pickling them in their cave-side house. The film was directed by writer and filmmaker Wes Craven and released in 1977 to terrified audiences. According to Craven, The Hills Have Eyes came from an article I saw in the New York Library about the Sawney Bean family. Craven was also privy to the part of the Bean tale in which one man managed to escape the cannibals' onslaught and alert the king. But Craven also found a surprising nugget of irony in the tale. After the king and his angry mob find the Bean family, they do the most excruciating things to them. I responded to the irony of it, of people who should be nice and civilized doing horrible things, and horror people have a nice side to them too. Now, whether the Bean family had any sort of nice side is certainly not clear from any of the legends, and if they're true, then probably not. I mean, I wouldn't want to be running into them on a side street, that's for sure, but anyways, nobody really knows if this is true or not. It could just all be propaganda from the English against the Scottish, but anyways, who really knows? Now, personally, I never watched the 1977 one. That's way too old for me. I watched the 2005, 2006 one and The Hills Have Eyes 2 that came out after that. So that's more of my generation, my era. Let me know if y'all have seen that one below. Let me know your favorite horror movie below. It's still Halloween type of thing, so let me know that. I'll probably try to get to watch some of them, or I'll let you know if I already seen it. And other than that, I got more videos soon. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. Stay safe. Happy Halloween. Get laid. Stay dangerous. I'll catch y'all soon.